May I have your attention, please? Good evening.
You're listening to Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. We thank you for tuning in and hope you enjoy another exciting episode of our show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. It's the end of January, but guess what? We have a new president. The other one is gone. The madness has gone away, I guess, for right now. We'll find out soon enough what's going to happen at the beginning of February if they decide to take him to trial and see what happens of this most recent impeachment that took place before he left. But boy, I am glad you are gone. So welcome to President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. They've been making moves in the last couple of days. President Biden is moving forward with placing Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. The Trump administration said back in 2019 that the new bill would be delayed for years because of technical issues. But President Biden will move forward with a plan announced 5 years ago and stalled by the Trump administration to place abolitionist Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. The Treasury Department is taking steps to resume efforts to put Harriet Tubman on the front of the new $20 notes, said White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. She said it is important that the country's money reflect the history and diversity of our country, and Harriet Tubman's image gracing a new $20 note would certainly reflect that. Now, the Obama administration announced in 2016 that it would be placing Tubman on a bill replacing Andrew Jackson. But the Trump administration said in 2019 that the change will be delayed until at least 2028 because of technical issues. Psaki said the White House is exploring ways to speed up that effort. Now, if the change is made, Tubman would be the first black person to be placed on U.S. currency. The initial decision to place Tubman on the bill was made after a 10-month review by the Obama administration, which solicited suggestions from the public on who should be the face of the newly redesigned $20 bill. Now, Trump had frequently praised Andrew Jackson and talked about modeling his presidency after him. Interesting. Very interesting, you know. But it's gonna take place, so it's coming, y'all. Those of you that don't want your 20s, make sure you get in touch with me, 807media@gmail.com. I'll tell you where to send it to, because I'll take them. Now, here are the executive orders Biden has signed so far. He signed a flurry of executive orders, actions, and memorandums aimed at rapidly addressing the coronavirus pandemic, dismantling many were taken in the first few days of his administration, including halting funding for the construction of the border wall, reversing the travel ban targeting largely Muslim countries, imposing a mask mandate on federal property, ramping up vaccination supplies, and requiring international travelers to provide proof of a negative COVID-19 test prior to traveling to the U.S. So they're starting to turn some things around and make some changes so that it'll be positive change. But right now, it's the sixth man, Dean Geronimo, is who I am. Good evening, everyone. And from NJ to NC, I'm in the studio with my right-hand man, Mark Lee. So, Mark, tell me what's good in your neck of the woods, my brother.
Well, it was raining earlier. I don't know whether that was good or bad, but it was definitely raining earlier, and so I'm trying to decide if that was a good or a bad thing. But I know we had some rain going on and all of that, so I'm trying to decide whether I like the rain or don't like the rain. But that's one of the things that was happening in this neck of the woods and all of that. And, of course, we do know that we did have some football that took place and everything, and I know that we did not get the results that we wanted and all of that because you had your elimination last week, and then the team that eliminated you then turned around and got eliminated. So now we got Kansas City going against Tampa Bay in that Super Bowl in 2 weeks and all of that. So that ought to be a good match. I don't know how I feel about a team getting to play its Super Bowl on its home field. I'm not really feeling that. I don't know how you're thinking about that, but, you know, they do pick them years in advance, and if you get to be good, I guess you get to have that happen to you. But they said that this is the first time that's ever happened because there have been some other cases where they played in the same city or maybe even the same area, but they didn't play on the same field that they play on. And this is, I think, I heard was the first time that they're actually going to play on the same field that they play on. But, hey, Kansas City is, I think, a pretty decent road team, so they probably can still go in there and still handle business and all of that. So definitely it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out and what happens in that regard. And by the way, I've also got to tease you about something that has nothing to do with sports. But, you know, I was sitting there checking out my social media and all that, and I saw that, you know, you decided to do a 15-minute appearance on one of our shows that happens on a regular basis. But, you know, I did not know that you were going to appear on Russ's show until I happened to look up, and I was like, hey, look at there. Dean is doing his thing, showing his real identity and everything, and having a whole conversation with Russ Hedge. So I've already teased Russ about that, but now I got to tease you as well. Because, you know, they say we all get our minutes of fame and everything, and you got, like, some solid fame right there all by yourself or with Russ and everything. So I was like, go ahead and get bad self, Dean.
You know what, man? He reached out to me, and we had talked, you know, just one of those things. It wasn't for a show or anything. He said, hey, can I talk to you for about 10, 15 minutes? I was like, yeah, cool, sure, you know. And we had a good time. We talked for a few minutes. He said, well, I want to talk to you again. I was like, all right, cool. You know, and I figured it was another 15 minutes, just chat, talk for a little bit, catch up, get off of the thing. And he was like, hey, would you be willing to do this for the show? I was like, uh-oh. So I was like, yeah, you know what? All right, cool, I'll do it. And then, you know, so it was pretty cool, though. You know, it didn't take long. And then when I listened to it, I was like, dang, man, he put that together real good. So, you know, I was like,
now, y'all did a smoking job. Now, like I said, but the things that you were sharing with him, what he was sharing with y'all, I mean, with you and vice versa and everything, it was done very well. I was actually quite pleased. I consider both of y'all to be friends of mine, and I thought that y'all both did an amazing job. I was like, go ahead, look at them brothers of mine going there and tag teaming and doing this powerful number. But no, I was quite pleased, and I thought that you had done a smoking good job. But, you know, even when you pop in and join in the conversation here, you oftentimes do an amazing job as well. I know that as you told him in that interview, you like to stay in the background and everything. But when I pull you out, you have great conversation and great insight and all of that. So definitely, I do know that you've got these skill sets also. So I thought you did a great job, and I thought that Russ brought out some interesting questions and some interesting background, and y'all definitely had some nice dialogue going on. But I did tell Russ, because I knew we were taking off last week, I'm like, I'm going to tease Dean about that when we come back on the air. So since we're back on the air, I have now done my job, and I have teased you about appearing in there. Even though Kim is still mad at you, because Kim still says you got to do some audio for her and everything with the international broadcast media. So we've got that going on. And speaking of international broadcast media, and we can talk about some of the great things, I had some amazing interviews this weekend. I did a pre-recorded because, sometimes people's schedules are all jacked up and everything, so they can't appear at the time of the actual show. But Haley Jane, I actually interviewed her yesterday, but it just aired a few minutes ago and everything, and she is an artist out of California and also a clothes designer and the mother of a biracial child and all of that. So she's doing a lot of different things. Young lady, definitely doing some things in the creative world, and it was great having that great conversation with her. And then earlier today, Amanda Jones, who is with a horror film, and called The Stairs that is going to be at Nevermore. She was on along with some other people that I brought in from the arts world, including Rahman Jamal, who has now been on a couple of our shows and everything with Hip Hop Congress, because he was actually talking about how certain films came out that didn't really explore the West Coast hip hop scene the way that he felt it should be as a member of West Coast. Because when they did the whole Electric Boogaloo one, he felt that they took some shortcuts, and he actually called them out in his conversation about that movie and when it came out, because apparently he was involved in a number of those movies. They're trying to change and show some of the real West Coast break dancers and hip hop and all of that, because he felt that they might have done some shortcuts and all of that. But Amanda was definitely a great finance lady, because, you know, a lot of times you can't get these projects made unless you got the money lady, the lady with the purses or the man with the purses or the man with the pocketbook and all of that. So she is definitely that person, and she shared a lot about what it means to be that person, what it means to be kind of like helping with the financing, but also what she looks for. And it sounds like she's trying to bring people with her, because the way she's doing her movement is it's almost like the rev share model. So she's trying to make sure that everybody from the janitor to the star gets paid. So like I said, they're doing that more kind of like spread the wealth kind of variety. So even though she's finding investors and also I think putting up some of her own money, she's also of that kind of attitude that she wants to make sure that everybody gets the rewards as this movie gets out there, and it's an indie movie and everything, and they've got some other projects. And she also said they're open to looking up projects and everything, because I was thinking that maybe there was like a limit, and she was like, nah, if it's good, I might be interested in it. So if you got like a movie idea or you got some other ideas, it sounds like she is open to those conversations and all. So she was on, and then we have some issues going on here in Durham around housing, and particularly around some certain communities having like asbestos and other things. So I just got off the air. That's why I was a minute or two late with Reverend Gatewood, who, you know, we've had on this show before. But Reverend Gatewood is going to be leading a rally on this Wednesday, talking about a number of things, because they've actually got a video that's exposing some of the things that are going on at McDougal Terrace and some other places. So they feel that it's a major crisis, and they wanted to put it out there to the world. So I said, hey, come on to the show, and we'll put it out there to the world. So they definitely did that, and it was great having that conversation also. So that's some of the things that have been going on the media side of what's been going on in the Mark Lee world. And then, of course, I'm still going over there doing the world's most boringest job of all time. I think I have found the world's most boringest job of all time. I'm sure there are other jobs that are very boring, but, you know, usually I'm in measurement. Usually I'm grading test papers, and that can get boring and kind of trite as well. But lately, because, you know, and don't get me wrong, it's a necessary job. But even necessary jobs can be very boring. And what I have to do is I literally have to, in some cases, because of my own errors, relabel or unlabel things that I might have messed up and everything. So unlabel some barcodes, and then also literally put a vowel and a packet into a small box. So literally, it's like that whole assembly line works. So you know that can get real mundane real fast.
Yeah, that's true. But, you know, you got to keep plugging away, man, because if you don't, you know, somebody will be willing to take your place.
They will be willing to take your place. You got to keep plugging away. And at the end of the day, we all got to pay them bills. So like I said, I just got a check last week, and I can already tell you that even though it wasn't in the four-figure amount, you know, like it wasn't in the thousands after taxes and everything, it was still a decent-sized check for the 2 weeks of work, less than 40 hours a week, so maybe, let's say 60 hours or whatever. So it was still a decent amount of a check, and it's already pretty much disappeared because this guy named Bill keeps coming by, and he keeps taking my money. Like I said, I don't know who this guy Bill is, but, you know, he got several of his friends, and they all have the same name, which is Bill, and they keep coming by taking money on a regular basis. I'm sure that even as a married person that you're also aware of Mr. Bill and Bill's friends as well, and I'm sure they come by and take stuff away from you and your wife and the kids and the grands and everybody else. So, you know, that Bill guy, we need to figure out what to do about Mr. Bill, because he just keeps coming around taking stuff, and, you know, sometimes it's house bill, sometimes it's electric bill, sometimes it's water bill. You know, he's got different names, but I just know that the last name is Bill. Do you know Mr. Bill?
Yeah, I do, and some days I wish he would just go away. But you know what? it's gonna come a time where Bill can just leave me alone, and we'll figure out who else he's gonna go harass. Because I'm about to hang all this stuff up, man, in a few years. you find someone else that tags out and bother, and good luck to you. So I'm winding down on this end.
It doesn't always wind it down. Sometimes that's a good thing to do. Wind it down. I thought we had somebody at the door.
Oh, yeah. We do, actually, and I'm about to find out who that is right now.
Let's do that.
Okay, let's see who this is. Thanks for calling Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. You are now on the line. Tell us who you are and where you're calling from. Hello?
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 Hey, how are you doing?
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Nora Dicker. I'm living in Raleigh, but I'm from Durham with Straight Talk Support Group.
Yes, and y'all have got some amazing things going on, and we've actually had in the past Bessie and some other people with some of the different transitional groups that have been on and everything. But y'all have a major event coming up, and that's part of the reason that I know y'all wanted to come on to talk about this amazing event that y'all have coming up here in the Triangle, as well as just the work that y'all do, because actually I've done a lot of work in the activism community, as well as, of course, in events and entertainment and media and things of that nature. But my partner in crime, Dean, actually works at a corrections facility up there in the New Jersey area, and that's what he was talking about when he said he's getting ready to retire after years of being in that field, but no time in the immediate future, but definitely several years down the line and everything. But I think he's already got that calendar going where he's sitting there counting the days off and everything, even though it might be a few years down the line and everything. So tell folks about this amazing event that I learned about that you have coming on, and I learned about it because you sent out a press release to WCOM, the low power radio station that I'm part of, and I was like writing back and said, oops, usually when I'm doing my stuff there, it's music oriented, and it has anything to do with news and information, but I have several news and information platforms that I'm part of, including Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. So definitely tell folks about what this event is and a little bit about the work that y'all do.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Nora Dicker, and I'm the Assistant Director to Straight Talk Support Group. So I'm so here to be on Straight Talk and about Straight Talk Support Group. So what we do is our main program is a transitional house for men who have been released from prison and are in need and some extra support and guidance. So what this fundraiser we're doing is called the Transition Journey, and it's to celebrate 8 years of Straight Talk Support Group. As you can tell from the name, it wasn't always a transitional house. It actually started as a support group for those whose loved ones were incarcerated. And then in 2017, a federal transitional house was closing, and our executive director, Miss Bessie Elmore, she had taught classes there, and she asked them, well, what's going to happen to the house? And they said, do y'all want it? And so here we are with Straight Talk Support Group with a transitional house.
Wow.
So we're really excited. Yes, I know. It's funny how things kind of fall into place like that. But so this transition journey is coming up in March 9th. And what we're doing is we have a local author, Mr. Tyrone Baker, who wrote A Convict's Perspective, Critiquing Peniology and Inmate Rehabilitation. And he volunteered himself to do a book reading for us. And he's also going to donate the proceeds of that book for the event to Straight Talk Support Group. So we're so happy to have such a generous partner working with us on this event. And after his reading, it's going to be followed by a panel of experts, some of which themselves have been previously incarcerated. Others work within the prisons, and others are connected to resources after, like once you're already back in the community. And our goal for this is, of course, to raise funds for the house. But on top of that, to raise awareness and educate the community about the experiences that just about everyone who is being released from incarceration goes through. Everyone's transition looks different, but it's always a transition. So we want to talk about, starting in prison, how people are prepared while they're still in prison for their transition, what resources are available for them in our area once they have been back into the community, and also what barriers they experience, because there are so many. So each ticket is going to be $25. Our goal is, of course, to raise money for the house, so that funding is coming from the ticket pricing as well as the proceeds from a convict's perspective. So thank you so much for having me to talk about this event.
No problem at all. Glad to have you to come on and talk about the event and everything. How did you first get involved with Straight Talk, and what about Straight Talk drew you to be involved in this particular organization, and what are some of the things that you've learned through your work there that have surprised you? Because I know a lot of times when you go into this kind of work, you are sometimes surprised by different things that you learn that you weren't expecting to be aware of, or things that you thought might be different based on your own perception of the prison system and of people getting out of incarceration, coming back into the workforce or coming back into society. So one, I'd like to learn, one, how you got involved in it yourself, and two, some of the things that have surprised you about things that you have learned in your own journey as the one of the directors and everything.
Okay, that's a great question. So I got into this work because I am a social work major, bachelor in social work. I graduated in 2019, and I was working with survivors of domestic violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking, but I've always had interest in working with justice-involved individuals. And so actually after reading Just Mercy and going to the movie to see it, I was really motivated by that book, which tells stories of, not even stories, but, true histories of people who have been either wrongly incarcerated or their sentences are really quite cruel, with either the length or the type of incarceration that they are experiencing. And through that book, it kind of got my wheels turning again. I really wanted to get involved in this field specifically, and I always kind of liked the idea of working in a transitional house, helping these guys into this new realm of life that they're stepping into. So I really just looked up organizations that support previously incarcerated people, and through that I was connected to Straight Talk Support Group and kind of knocked on the door and said, I will do anything. If whatever position y'all have, I just want to be involved. So it's really grown from there, which I'm really so thankful for.
And was this something that you were always interested in the sense of like trying to be a justice advocate, or did you have folks in your own family that had gone through the system and that's what drew you to the whole field and everything, or is it something that was just an interest of yours even when you were like in high school and college, or is it an interest that developed later in life?
I would say it's more so been an interest for me. I've always been really passionate about racial justice, and we know there's so much injustice racially in the criminal justice system. So I feel like through that passion, it kind of naturally guided me to the path of working kind of alongside of the criminal justice system and helping people who have been through it and then, kind of need more help getting back on their feet, because there are so many barriers to experience once you have been incarcerated. The labeling in this society of criminal is very strong, and it really will follow a person for the rest of their life.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that with a number of folks and everything that I've had the pleasure of knowing, some that have been involved in the criminal justice system, including my good friend Mike Anderson, who's actually founder of Polished Souls and does a lot of work in terms of trying to get our youth to understand that they don't even necessarily need to get involved in some of the things that might get them carried into the prison system and all of that. But what are some of the things, as you've been doing this work, that surprised you about the work and about people's reactions, something that maybe as you've been doing this work you were not expecting, that you have now found that has happened that was not something that you expected, but you are now finding ways to navigate?
I mean, before going into the work, I knew how serious the stigma and the labeling of being a convicted felon or just a convicted person really is. But I think through my work here, I've really realized the scope of it, just from little things being that, you know, when I would tell people, yeah, I work in a transitional house for men, people's reactions are, you know, sometimes like, wow, that's really cool, but it's often like, do you feel safe? Like, what craziness have you experienced? And things like that, more so negative comments, which I could reply with, you know, not much crazy, to be honest. Everyone is really nice and really respectful and really want to get on their feet, you know. So that was interesting because I think people sometimes can get so caught up in that stigma that they're taking a person for their crime and not the person who happens to do a crime, you know, which I think can be a really big difference in attitude, because not everyone, people who commit crimes for the most part are not people who have their life going exactly how they want it to. They're not living happy lives. That's not what puts people to crime. For a lot of situations, it's not really the first choice to do something illegal because of the repercussions. So I really just feel like I've found in many different ways the stigma and the power that it holds in this society.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and you're right. A lot of folks don't go into these things, whether these criminal activities, because of that's like their first choice. A lot of times it's out of, I hate to put it this way, but out of necessity, because they're feeling that they need to put food on their table. They need to put ways to survive in some kind of way. So this is kind of like their last resort, whatever that criminal activity is, particularly those that are involved in a number of those that might be like the robberies and things of that nature. But I would argue a lot of the different kinds of crimes is things that were not necessarily, you just put it, planned out and all of that. And then it doesn't probably help that we've had past administrations that were kind of like putting that whole law and order kind of attitude out there and everything. So definitely, how has that impacted even some of the work that you've done? Like I said, now we've got somebody that is definitely maybe not as much law and order, even though some people would argue that Kamala did have some of that law and order attitude when she was in California. But definitely the person that was there before and everything was all about trying to paint the whole law and order argument. So when you hear those kind of arguments, what is your response to that, and how does it work in playing into the work that you do?
Well, personally, I don't really see any order in the law and order mentality, to be honest. I think I've seen, you know, firsthand that prison isn't really doing anything positive. In a lot of cases, you know, in some cases people are able to maybe reach an education, get some trade schools, things like that. That's just not the case for every person who's incarcerated. So it's definitely not opening up any opportunities for people. And these are people who already felt like opportunities weren't easily accessible or accessible enough for them. So that's why they went into the crime. So the whole thing of law and order, I don't really see how that can make anything better, because you're just pushing people further to crimes. And as we've seen, it's just pushing people to be targeted, you know, by police officers and stuff. So I'm definitely happy to not have that sort of phrase in our president government right now.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on that. Glad that they're not pushing that kind of phrasing and everything. Now, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm imagining that is also impacting the work that y'all are doing as well. So how has the impact been in that regard? Because I'm imagining that in a lot of ways, just being in a transition home and also trying to be COVID safe has also been something that y'all have had to deal with also. So how do you maintain the COVID protocol as you are also trying to keep the inmates moving into a different place in society?
Right. Well, I'll tell you, it's hard. I mean, so I guess the biggest change is that now we have guys who are ELC, which means extended limits of confinement. So it means that they are no longer in prison, but they are not finished with their sentence. So they're finishing their sentence at our transitional home. So they're still technically incarcerated, which have some different rules and like boundaries and things like that it's new. And some of those things are kind of changing as we go, because this is a completely new situation that really no administration was ready for. But that's definitely been an interesting part. And, of course, because these guys who are ELC, they're ELC because they're high risk. So we have to we take precautions. We take temperatures three times a day. Everybody has to wear a mask. A lot of their appointments became telehealth. It's hand sanitizer everywhere. I mean, we're lucky to be in an area where hand sanitizer is accessible through different types of administration. So we've never had to worry about not having enough of that. But it's like we had to close one of the rooms because if by chance we do get a positive case, which knock on wood, we have not had any positive cases in the house yet, we would hope that it would be isolated incident, so we could have that resident stay in the quarantine room. We've got the the gowns to wear. We've got as much PPE as we can have, face shields, but we're also working to put a plan together on how we could get everyone tested, because then it comes to the boundary or to the barrier of, if we do have a positive case, how can we get all of the residents tested? Because we do have a van, but that would mean putting a staff member at quite a heavy risk if they weren't already, because of course we work in their home. So it's definitely been a couple challenges, and now of course we're trying to figure out we're trying to learn more about the vaccine, try to see when possibly we could get our residents on that list if they were to choose so. So it's a ton of new stuff that comes really with each passing week that we're trying to figure out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as the transitions, are they all pretty much here in North Carolina, or do you ever have cases where you're having folks that are transitioning back to other home members that may be in other states? Like I said, Dean actually works in the New Jersey area and all of that, and definitely has some family members that are tied to New York and other cities, including Virginia. But definitely, I was just wondering, is it always pretty much that you're transitioning people into apartments and housing here in North Carolina, or are you also taking them out of the state? And if so, how does that whole process work?
So for the most part, we are, it is majority people choose to stay in North Carolina, but that doesn't mean that they were from North Carolina, and that's not all the cases. So we absolutely have guys who are currently staying with us right now whose goals are to go back to New York, Missouri, wherever Texas, So it, of course, depends on what level of supervision they're under. Oftentimes, the guys are not, most of our guys are under some form of supervision, whether it be post-release, probation or parole. So a lot of them have probation officers. So for them to do interstate travel in that way, and they're under supervision, they have to get that okay from their PO first. And if they're ELC, they have to get approved for interstate transfer, which comes from the state that they want to transfer to, which includes having to check a home plan. So wherever they plan to go in that state, they will have to, in that state, in the area, the probation officer that would be theirs if they were transferred has to check the home or wherever their home plan is to make sure that it's safe, that there's space, that it seems like a cohesive environment for this person to return to. So once that's approved, then it can get approved for them to do that interstate travel. But it really just depends on the level of supervision that they have and their probation officer.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I know in some transition programs, I'm familiar with some of the people that work at TROSA here in Durham, and there are a couple of other transitional programs like that. They have other jobs and they have other things that they are part of. Like I know TROSA does the Christmas trees, and they also have furniture stores and move-in stores. And then, of course, they're very much involved in the festival scene. When we have festivals, of course, we've not been having those over the last several months and everything. But when we've had them, they were oftentimes the folks that would help with a lot of the for lack of a better term, grunt work and kind of the moving of stage stuff and things of that nature, as well as some of the cleaning of these festivals and things of that nature. Do y'all have job programs similar to that with your program that TROSA has, and that maybe even I think the Durham Rescue Mission has had some similar kind of programs like that and everything? So I was just wondering, do y'all have those kind of job programs? And if so, what are they, the ones that y'all offer? Because like I said, I know that the Rescue Mission here in Durham, I think they run a store, and they also have a couple of other outside businesses as well. So what are some of the ones that y'all have, if y'all have any?
So we don't actually have any type of job program similar to the Thrift Store of Durham Rescue Mission or the moving company that TROSA does. We have a lot of focus on what we say is we try to serve 360 degrees of the person. So we focus first off on getting them connected to mental health providers, physical health providers, substance use counseling. Identification is huge because often, like, the guys only come with their prison ID, which is, of course, not accepted for jobs or anything like that. So first we have to get working on, obtaining a state ID, which first they probably need a birth certificate and a Social Security card. So that's a big part. And then we get them connected to disability benefits. If they're eligible, then we try to get them connected to vocational rehab, which is a partnership that we have that's through NC Works to kind of help them with job readiness. We are connected to Durham Tech and try to get them prepared in that way. So more of our focus is less so on providing them with the jobs, but providing them with the skills and the support that they need so that they can find the jobs themselves. Of course, we do have we do computer lab every morning for 2 hours. I actually personally run that with the help of other residents who are familiar with technology and can kind of help me show the guys, because some guys have been in prison for 20 plus years and haven't ever used a laptop or computer before. So we really do have to start with the basics for some of these guys. So we do work on resume building, cover letter writing, interview skills, things like that. So we try to prepare them for the workforce and their job searching, and we, of course, assist them along that way.
And that's probably very helpful these days, because I know in the past a lot of the folks that were, whether they were transitioning from prison systems or whether they were part of our homeless population or a number of other kind of transitional type people and everything, would oftentimes find themselves doing a lot of that kind of work in the libraries. And of course, we do know that the libraries were also impacted by the pandemic and weren't necessarily open as much, or if they've been open at all, because I know in some cases they've been totally closed. So this kind of like opportunity that you're giving your residents is probably something that they in the past might have gotten by going to the public library or some of these other things that aren't necessarily as accessible as they used to be.
Right. And something that we found through these we learn as we go too, and we kind of try to adjust our program from the things that we learn from our residents as well. And something that we did learn is that so many residents who come to the house, their first thing is, I got to get a job. I have to be making money. And that can so much take over their thought process and their world, that they just need to be making money, that things like taking care of their mental health or going to substance abuse counseling, it will really just fall to the side. Maybe they don't know how to use a computer, but they're so focused on getting a job that with their trade that they already knew before being incarcerated that they might never even put in the time. So we do have track requirements that for the first month we try to stay away from the employment side, and so we can get everything else good, because it will come back, it will. One day you'll be working so hard and that back problem that you always had, it's way worse, and now you can't work, but you also haven't been connected to a primary provider yet. So that's why we try to keep the focus in the beginning off the jobs and getting them served in their more fundamental basic needs.
Yeah, because it sounds to me like, and I've heard this from a couple of different programs, that y'all are trying to have them develop on a lot of different levels. So it sounds like you're trying to have them continue their growth as they're coming back into the mainstream society on both the spiritual level, the physical level, the mental level, the emotional level, and some of the other various levels that we all as humans try to cope with as people and everything. So it sounds to me like y'all are trying to do things to enhance all of those aspects of their life. So I'm imagining that the house probably has like some exercise programs and maybe even some things that are helping people with their spirituality, whether that's Bible study or whether that's meditation courses or whatever else that they might be doing. But am I correct in thinking that y'all are trying to help them continue to develop as well-rounded individuals as they do come back into mainstream society?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing with our 360 degrees of care. You got to serve the whole person, or else you're going to get a person who still has gaps in their needs, and they might not be able to know how to access those resources, and that might come to light after they're out of the program and they can't get that help anymore. And of course, we try to take into account what the resident's priority is, which pretty typically is employment, housing, and get a car. Pretty consistently across the board, those are the first main goals. But as we get to know them and talk to them more, we can help identify, oh, you haven't been talking to your family in the whole time you were incarcerated? Well, let's see what we can do, get you connected to your family, things like that. So we're able to kind of learn what this resident really needs the more we get to know them.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, because I know there have even been cases of like folks that have been incarcerated for years, sometimes even wrongfully incarcerated, and then when they come out, the whole family dynamics have changed because certain family members may have moved or have gone to other places, or in some cases they're not even alive anymore. I remember watching a documentary, and I don't remember the case, but it was some famous gentleman, and he had actually, by the time he got out, they showed him going in his neighborhood, and the neighborhood had totally changed and everything. And it was one of those cases of somebody being wrongfully convicted and all of that. And then when he came out, it was a totally different kind of environment. And there have been a couple of movies like that, but the one that is in my mind, but I can't think of the title. Definitely, we oftentimes hear those kind of horror stories and everything. I'm imagining quite a few of these folks also want to get involved in the entrepreneurial side. So do y'all try to encourage them on that? Because I know you don't necessarily want them to, you've said how y'all feel about the job, but I do know that there have been some very successful, like I said, Mike Anderson, I would consider a successful entrepreneur, but there's also the guy that does, I think it's called Flavor Desserts, and he came out of the prison system, and there's a guy locally that does a hot dog stand, and he came out of the prison system. So I do know sometimes there are some great entrepreneurs that came out of the prison system as well, and they may have even come up with these ideas of entrepreneurship while being inside. So do y'all help encourage those kind of thoughts as well, or do y'all want to wait for them to get involved in that after they've got the other elements of their life together?
I mean, so that would still be considered like part of the job part, but of course we want to encourage like any of their goals that they have. So we had a resident who he had a really big goal. He wanted to get his own restaurant, and so I personally helped him kind of figure out how to apply for grants for startups and things like that. It is something we want to support any of their goals, and you're absolutely right. There can be so many great entrepreneurs who have been incarcerated, and something I love about their companies or businesses is that it's often that they will hire other people who have been incarcerated as well. So it's just bringing up the whole community. So we do love to support that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What have been some of the other cases like that you can think of some of the success stories of people that have left, and whether it's a particular business or whether it's a person that has reconnected with their family, and if you can share any of the success stories that you're able to share or that y'all talk about a lot. I do know that, of course, everybody that is familiar with Straight Talk is familiar with both Miss Elmore and her son, but I'm sure that there are many others that are part of that story as well. So I'd love to hear some of the ones that have really touched your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll talk about one of our most recent success stories. So he was actually an ELC release too. So they had some different rules and limits of their confinement as well. But he came with a group of other guys, and they immediately started working on like Straight Talk Support Group's landscaping. I mean, they came one day, and I'm walking into work at 8 a.m. the next day, and they're all taking like vines off of the fence of the basketball court. And he just remained very motivational. I mean, the whole house attitude kind of changed, just having his energy around, because he was so hardworking. He was so focused on his transition. And he did have a hard time for a while. He was trying to get a change of address so he could return to the Greensboro area. And it kind of did get him down for a little bit that his change of address request wasn't approved by his probation officer, and he didn't realize. But he tried again, and he was approved, and he had to play. He was going to live with his significant other, who was very supportive to him throughout this process. He got his own truck. He's employed, and he's somebody who still calls our residential counselors often to kind of tell us how he's doing and to check in on the house. And definitely we would like to have him come back to the house once COVID is over. We try to limit as much exposure possibly as we can. But we would love to come to him and talk to the house to be like a motivational speaker, because he went through the program and he definitely experienced some barriers, but he really pushed through and strived.
Yes, I think he did a great and amazing job. He said he was doing landscaping, and he's also connected with his significant other. So it sounds like he's doing some amazing work in that sense and everything. And what about in the sense of like family connections? So I do know that family connections are very important and all of that. And like I said, whenever I think of those, I definitely oftentimes think of Bessie and her son. But are there any kind of like connections or stories that you can share about folks that might have reconnected with family members that they might have lost touch with when they were in the system and everything, but now they are reconnecting in whatever form or fashion, whether that was husband, wife, whether that was sons and fathers, or whether that was any of the other family dynamics that may exist out there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, sometimes we get the real pleasure of seeing these guys reconnect with, oftentimes it's more so their children who they haven't seen. The guy that I'm thinking of right now, he just saw his daughter for the first time, and I think in 30 years. And that's really something that you can't like explain. I came back from the weekend and he was like, oh, I just had the most amazing week. He was just gushing. The energy was so phenomenal. And, we've also had people whose parents are aging. And one guy, his mother was really in poor health, but before she passed, we were able to kind of organize a surprise visit with his fiance and I believe sibling, and they brought their mother there by surprise for him, and that was just, to see that and to see that joy is just that. That's why we're in the work, right? Is to help these people really feel joy and feel empowered. And so some of these reconnections are just truly amazing. And sometimes those reconnections kind of initially start while they're incarcerated, and those family members and that love can be a really strong motivator for them once they get out again.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things you said is that when you first got into the work of social work and everything, you had thought that you were going to do more work in the sense of like domestic violence and domestic issues and things of that nature. And now you're working in the transitional kind of environment. What are some of the similarities and differences between the work that you thought you were going to get into in social work and what you're doing now, as and some of the ways that you see them being both the same and different? I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, because in some ways they seem very much like they would be very similar, but on other ways they might have some very much almost polar opposites in the directions of that kind of social work. So, but that's just my perception. I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah. Well, it's actually very interesting. So I would say a big similarity is kind of the idea to meet your clients or residents where they're at. And they're both dealing with really big stigmas for domestic violence, sexual violence. We know that there's a lot of blame on the victim, like if it's a relationship, well, why did you stay that long? Or if it's sexual assault, where, what were you drinking? What were you wearing? What did you do to get this to happen to you? And so that's a really negative stigma that follows survivors of domestic violence, sexual violence, human trafficking. And then there's the stigma, of course, that follows people who have been previously incarcerated. And when I worked with domestic violence, I worked in an emergency shelter, and I was a crisis advocate. So I would say that my crisis work definitely is applicable across the board. Of course, it's different working with majority men and working with women, but those crisis skills are definitely still very key. A big thing I think about working with people who might be going through a crisis in that moment is that people just want to feel heard. And I think that's something that we as a society forget about a lot of times. We're like, well, how can we fix it? Well, let's listen to them first and figure out what they need. And then an actually very interesting, I guess, difference is that when I worked with domestic violence, of course, I was working with the survivors. And now in this transitional house, some of these residents are past perpetrators of violence to their significant others. So it definitely has been a very interesting experience, because you realize, I mean, people are people in the same way that I said people don't commit crimes if they're feeling fulfilled in their life. Well, people aren't abusive to other people if they're feeling happy and fulfilled in their life. And of course, there's that cycle of violence where if you witnessed it when you were a child or you experienced it at a younger age, you're more likely to model that behavior as you get older. But it's definitely interesting kind of working on both sides of the issue of domestic violence.
Yeah, definitely. I can see where that would be very similar, and it would definitely have those similarities, but also those differences in everything. So I'm sure that folks are very much fascinated by the ways that they are connected and all of that. What are some of the other things that have surprised you about your own personal reaction to the work and everything? So if there's something about the way that work has impacted you and your own life and everything that has surprised you or not surprised you, because I know sometimes folks are surprised at the way that it impacts them on an emotional level, or the way that the work impacts them on a different other kinds of levels. But I would like to know how you have felt it has impacted you, and whether you've been surprised by those reactions or not.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every day I'm learning so much about these residents' experiences, and some of which, you know, they're my age, you know, and so it's really eye-opening to see how someone's different experiences throughout life could get them to so many different places. But I think something that really surprised me is that, you know, when you're not reading these guys' files and you're not reading their crimes, they're just people just needing help as much as anybody else. So I guess I kind of was surprised to find that I wasn't always thinking, oh my God, this person committed murder. You know, I know what each person has done in this house, but when I'm working with them, that's not really what comes to mind. And I don't think that's what comes to mind for really anybody working within the criminal justice system in the supportive fashion. Because otherwise it'd probably be quite hard to give someone support if you're constantly thinking what their crime is. So I guess I was surprised with the ability of myself as well as my coworkers to not take that label and put that on the resident themselves, because that's something we as society do so often. You know, if you were to find out that someone had been in prison, your first question might be, well, what did you do? When in reality it might not actually matter, because they're still just the person that you were just talking to moments ago before you even knew that they were incarcerated.
And the other thing, and I know this is oftentimes talked about even on some of the TV series and the movie series that have come out about prison systems and everything of that nature, prisons are oftentimes a microcosm of society. And we've oftentimes talked about that with COVID and things of that nature. But we're also in the middle of the whole, like, other pandemic that exists, which is race relations and class relations and things of that nature. And we do know that in the bigger prison system, there are all kinds of different folks that are of different religious backgrounds, like there might be Muslim brothers as well as brothers from Christianity. And there are also different folks from different ethnicities. And sometimes they might even be part of what we would consider kind of, I won't say hate groups, but definitely extreme kind of groups and everything, whether that's the motorcyclists or whether that's the skinheads or a number of other kind of folks. So as one that is doing the transitional environment, how do y'all cope with that? Because I'm thinking that even in the transitional house, there's got to be folks that are probably falling in that same kind of microcosm that exists in the bigger prisons, because we do know that there are folks that might be part of the different organizations, whether that's the Nation of Islam, whether that's some of the other organizations that might be out there as well on the white side, or the Latin Kings, or a number of other kind of things that are out there. So how, in the transitional home, do y'all cope with the fact that of the prison being a microcosm and them being involved in some other organizations that they probably don't need to be involved in. But that's just my personal opinion. But
Right.
but they are part of the environment that they came out of and everything.
Right. Well, of course, we absolutely have a zero tolerance for any type of hate acts. We have, as our house is majority minority, most of our residents are, for the most part, Black. So we don't really see much of the white supremacist groups, at least that are still, I guess, I don't want to say practicing, but if that was the case, they don't act on it from what we've seen or what we've heard from other residents while they're here. So that they would remain under the radar. Now, we have had one or two residents who are part of the Nation of Islam, and we definitely have other Muslims as well, just not the Nation. And so as a religion, we don't have any type of religion that Straight Talk Support Group supports by any means. We want everybody to be able to practice what they need to be practicing or feel that they want to be practicing, of course, in a respectful way. Right. So honestly, from my experience, granted I've been here since March, I have not seen any clashing of cultures in that way, either in a way that's witnessed by staff or, you'd be surprised that these guys really do tell on each other. If some guy says something iffy over here, another guy is probably going to run and tell a staff. So from what we've heard, we haven't really heard of many clashings of that ways, which is great, but it would be a zero tolerance, and we do have peer support specialists who do mediation if that were to be necessary.
That makes sense. Dean, I was going to bring you into the conversation and everything. Are we seeing that? Because like I said, I'm just going by what I remember seeing from Oz, and of course we do have things going on in the greater society and everything, but are we seeing that those kind of groups are still prevalent in the prison system, particularly like the one that you work at in New Jersey and just in general, and on the big scene and like what y'all deal with there in New Jersey? How do y'all cope with that if it does exist? Because like I said, I'm just going by what I see on TV and what I read in the movies and what a few friends have told me that they have experienced, but I don't have that kind of direct experience that you do and everything. So how do y'all cope with those kind of groups that may exist and bring that kind of thought pattern into the prison system there in New Jersey?
It's nothing you can do. You're going to have all types of individuals. In the 22 years I've been in prison, an inmate is an inmate is an inmate. They may be Muslim, they may be Catholic, they may be Jew, they may be pagan, they may be Latin King, they may be Blood, Crip, MS-13, and you have to treat them all the same with decency and respect. So it's dramatized for entertainment purposes. When you see it on television and you see all the stuff going on, to be honest, most days in prison are boring as hell. Mm-hmm. There are some days that some things happen, but the way they dramatize it and politicize it and all of that other stuff, all of that is not happening. Trust me, I would not still be there if all of that was going on, because that's too much in too little of a time frame. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you have let's say in a year's time, you may have 10 major incidents in a year, if that, because if you are firm, fair, consistent, and you take the time to listen instead of reacting, any fool can fight. So, if you go in with the mindset of, oh, we're going to handle these inmates, no, not necessarily, because when you look at the numbers, you're outnumbered. So the first thing you have to use is your brain. And yes, there are some that don't know how to use their brain, and things happen a little differently for them, and not so much, but it is boring, man. It's like rehabilitation begins with the offender. So now is, you know what? Okay, you did what you did. You've been sentenced to time. What's next? What are you going to do to better yourself so that when you leave here, you can go and be with your families and become a productive, law-abiding citizen? Because if you come back here, we're not going to do anything but put you back into the space in which you came from. You're going to be mad all over again, and you're wasting time off of your life. So now, you have the programs and the different things to try to, and everybody doesn't take to it, but that's okay, because those that want to be helped will definitely let you know. And then it's your job. It is your job. It's like reaching out your hand. It's like, all right, y'all, I'm lifting some people up. Who wants to come? There are going to be some people that grab your hand automatically. They know they made a mistake. They wish they had never done it, and now they have a higher hill to climb. Okay. But then there's some who, you can't get stuck on the ones that say, no, I'm good. I don't need any help. I'm going to come back to prison anyway because my brothers are here, my cousins are here, my grandfather was here, and this is the family thing that we do. And until they get tired of being tired, there's nothing you can do for them. However, you still have to be respectful. You still have to treat them with dignity because first and foremost, they are people. So,
that makes sense.
Most definitely.
Some people say, oh, he's just an inmate. Well, one incident separates me from being in there and me being on this show right now. Thank God that incident has never come. But when people start to look and realize that they're dealing with people, it's not an alien race. It's not, oh my God, they're going to come out here and terror. They were out in the world for a long time before they made the mistake they made. They come into adult time out, and then they go back to the communities. So the question then becomes, they will point the finger quick. What is the correction system doing to help them? Okay, what is the community doing to keep them out, to help them stay out? So it's not just one-sided. It's a double-sided thing, and we're dealing with people. Good people are good people, and good people make mistakes too.
Yeah, and Nora, that actually raises an interesting question, which is how important is it for you to have the society's involvement in the work that you do? Because like I said, I do know that that's also very important for us to have the involvement of society also as people are coming in and all of that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as to the importance of society and getting these people involved in the transition process, whether that's business owners, whether that's the family members, which we've already alluded to some degree, or a number of other folks. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as to the importance of having that support from the rest of society. Nora? Can Nora hear my question?
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I thought y'all could hear me. But I was saying the phrase people say, it takes a village. That really is true. Especially, when you said employers, that really hit, because for people who have individual businesses and things like that, to not, have the box of have you been convicted of a felony or misdemeanor or things like that, because it really, in the most cases, won't make a difference for how good of an employee they are. It actually might make them a harder worker, honestly. So to not have those barriers up saying that, no, we won't hire anybody who's been incarcerated, no matter the time that they were incarcerated on, that would really help people's ability to transition from incarceration to a successful, fulfilling, and, within the legal lines life. As well as, not having, like you said, family members are really important, but also support groups are great too. I mean, bringing a community together to realize that incarceration, it does not ruin a person. A crime does not ruin a person. A person commits a crime. It doesn't mean that they are their crime. And, if we work together to kind of educate and raise awareness on that stigma and how it's just not really applicable to so many cases. I feel like in the long run that would definitely help people. I mean, if you think about it on like a really kind of in-depth change, but for example, if you've got a jury of people, most of which all believe that you are the crime that you committed, it might be really hard for you to get a unbiased opinion from your jury. So it can be in so many different things, but absolutely it would be great if the community, every community could come together and really support all of the people in their community.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I definitely need to have more of that going on and everything. Now, Dean, earlier we were talking about how on a lot of levels this kind of work can be very mundane and very boring and not all as exciting or that kind of Hollywood image that I was alluding to and everything. I'm imagining that you had that similar experience where you're sitting there, well, on one level, very much glad to have the great benefits that you have and everything, but on another level, going like, that it's not as exciting as maybe you thought it was going to be, and it's very mundane kind of work. Because I'm imagining that even at this transitional house, that a lot of times it can be very mundane work that you're doing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about the nature of the work and how you try to add some sort of get past the drudgery of the job.
Yeah, I mean, some days are totally quiet days. Guys are kind of just doing their own thing. And unfortunately with COVID, there is a lot of downtime for the guys. So they might be actually doing some activities that are pretty similar to what they were doing while incarcerated, whether it be, sitting and writing letters or watching TV all day. And COVID has limited a lot of the activities that these residents could be doing. And a lot of their stuff is done telehealth and things like that through computers, Zooms, and phone calls instead. But I mean, I run a computer lab for 2 hours every day, so that definitely keeps me busy, and it helps me really get to know the residents and kind of figure out where overall this population is at with some of the needs that they have. So that definitely keeps me interested, as well as, I mean, there's always things that we can be doing, always things that we can be helping, whether it's applying for grants or reaching out to community partnerships. But our main goal is absolutely to keep our guys as busy as possible, because downtime is not always the friend of a person who's been incarcerated, especially since so many people who have been incarcerated have had issues with substance use in the past, and that can be downtime can be a really dangerous thing for those cravings.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That would be a dangerous time for those cravings, as well as a number of other kind of negative cravings that might be out there as well that folks may get caught up in. Some of them might even involve the computer and things of that nature. So I'm sure that downtime can cause all kinds of problems on all kinds of levels and all of that. So I'm sure that also becomes an issue as well with some of the folks maybe not using the computer for the purposes that y'all were hoping the computer would be used for, because they're having that downtime and they're maybe using it for things that they don't need to be using it for, just because they have that time and they are missing certain elements of their life.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think we can say that for a lot of things too. Downtime isn't always the friend of really any person.
Yeah, that's very much true. It can cause a lot of what's that old saying, the idle mind, and everything is something that I'm sure a lot of folks can relate to and think about on a regular basis, because that is one that a lot of folks will find that idle mind, and their mind will go wherever their mind feels like going at that particular time, that, as we just said, it probably doesn't need to be going in that particular direction. Now, do y'all have a certain amount of people that you're able to hold in the transition home? Because I know that certain organizations may have a certain amount of folks that they can hold, because I was actually on the board sometime back of Threshold, and Threshold also does some work in terms of transition and things of that nature. And, of course, that's another Durham-based program as well. But I do remember that even though they had some, and I think they were a transitional spot as well, because I think there were some places that they kept their folks at as well. And I know TROSA does have some transitional homes, as does the Rescue Mission. I guess all three of them do, that I'm thinking about in my head and everything. But that being said, are there limitations to how many people you can actually have in the house, and if so, and also how are the folks picked that are coming into the Straight Talk house and everything? So one is how is they picked, and is there a limitation to how many people you can have?
So yes, we do have about 18 beds. The number of residents really stays to be about 15 though. So we do have space for more, but it stays a little bit less, and that's good because some of the guys that come do have physical limitations, and so they might not be able to make it onto a top bunk. So we do have limitations in space just because it is literally a house that has a lot of bedrooms, but it is a home. So there's limited space of that way. But in terms of eligibility or who gets into the program, we do have a contract with the Department of Public Safety, and so all of our referrals do come from DPS, which could be a caseworker in the prison who refers their clients to us. But in terms of who gets referred, it doesn't really have a difference on crimes, length of their sentence. We are across the street from a school, so we don't have any sex offender residents at the house. But from what I've found, for most of the residents when they come here, and this is not including ELC, since ELC extended limits of confinement, they're still technically finishing out their sentence. So if they were just released, they might have a different place to go. But for most part, the guys that come to us would otherwise be homeless.
Gotcha. And what was the reaction when the transitional home came there from the community? Because like I said, I do know that you just mentioned that it was a school nearby, and I know that there's probably houses and neighborhoods nearby as well. And I do know that in the past, sometimes when transitional homes have come, folks have not always been as receptive as I feel they should be. I think even when the Dick's property came around, we're not all that excited about that, and there was some folks up in arms about Dick's and everything of that nature. So what was the reaction when y'all came into the neighborhood, and how did y'all go about negotiating with the neighborhood, depending on whether they were friends or foes in terms of being supporters of the transitional home being there?
Right. Well, luckily, Straight Talk Support Group didn't really have to deal with that much because we did just take over a federal transitional house for the same purpose. So the house had been a transitional house for men who have been released from incarceration for years. So we didn't really have to, as Straight Talk Support Group came into it, deal with a surprise or anything because there wasn't a change. Of course, we are quite conscious of our neighbors. We don't want there to be any complaints, so we consider some noises because we do have a lot of residents with mental health issues, so some of them do have loud screaming outbursts, so we do have to kind of figure out, okay, how can we help you through your crisis without this really intense noise level? So we do have to be very conscious of our neighbors, but luckily the transitional house itself was not new to the neighborhood.
Well, that's good. So they were already somewhat aware of what transitional homes were all about, and were able to actually have some understanding of what was going on and who some of the residents were and all of that. So, and you're currently at the full capacity, so you're currently at the 15 capacity and everything, or you have a little bit less or a little bit more at the current moment?
Well, so technically our capacity really is 18 beds, but it just seems that we do stick to be more around the 15. And if I am thinking correctly, I think we have about 13 guys right now.
Yeah, so not quite fully at the 15, but definitely doing the great work that y'all need to be doing on that regards and everything. You had actually alluded to it earlier, and I was just wanting to hear your thoughts on this, and if Dean wants to jump in, he can. But you had mentioned about the prison system and rehabilitation, and the fact that I got the impression that you don't think that there's that much rehabilitation that actually goes on within the prison system, but that's just kind of like the impression I got based on one of your past answers. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as to whether we're even doing a good job of trying to rehabilitate people to get into mainstream society while they're in the system, or do you feel that it won't happen until they get to a transitional home like what y'all are doing now, or do you think that they could do a better job within the existing prison system that probably needs some reform on a lot of different levels? But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think they could be doing a better job, but I can't really make, just because everything can always be doing better. And it's not like our society or government puts a lot of emphasis on supporting people who are incarcerated. But for the overall, I can't truly say what is being done because every prison is different. Every caseworker is different too. You might be in the same prison, but you're getting way more support from one caseworker than your cellmate who has a different caseworker is, you know? So I can't really say I can't really make a generalizing statement on that, but I do feel like there could be more programs. I also know that you have to be in good standing to be in these educational programs or workforce programs or trade training programs, you know, and so sometimes we get guys who, like we had one resident who spent about 6 years of his life together in solitary confinement, and he was in prison since he was 16 years old. So in cases like that, I don't think enough was done for this man, you know, and a lot of mental health cases are kind of ignored. A lot of people who have been incarcerated, their mental health status or kind of the way that their mental health is affecting them in that way could really make a huge difference on maybe possibly why they committed their crime or the nature that they committed that crime. But not always are they sent to a mental health facility. Maybe they're just put in with the rest of the general population. Now, again, I can't say this happens for every person, but I've met plenty of residents who have come through the house whose symptoms are not automatically so obvious. And for residents like that, I imagine that they didn't get the right mental health support that they really needed. And still, because they didn't get that support in prison, it's hard for us to immediately know, oh, okay, they need to get that support because our paperwork comes from the prison in the first place. So I do think there's so many areas where rehabilitation could be better. But I'm excited to learn about that because on our Transitional Journey fundraiser, that is part of our focus because we do want to talk about the whole transition journey, which does indeed start with while you're in incarceration. So we're going to hear from Mr. Tyrone Baker, the local author, as well as other people who have been previously incarcerated and people who work within the prisons on their opinions on how do you feel the support you received or the support you see is offered. Do you feel like that fits the purpose enough or serves the person well enough? Because sometimes we hear residents and they're like, hey, I just hear I was getting out. I signed whatever paper I needed to sign just so I could get out. And they have no idea the limits of supervision that they are under or basically the program that they are coming into.
And will the program that y'all are having that's coming up very shortly and everything, will it also touch on the impact of those that are going through transition from the prison to mainstream society in terms of their relationship to the homeless population? Because I do know, living around the corner from Duke, that there are a few people that I see on a regular basis that are out of that homeless community, and I think some of them may have even been in my conversation with him because I'm just that kind of guy that will talk to people as I meet them and everything, came out of the prison system. So I was wondering, will you have that as part of your discussion as well, and can you share a little bit about what time the discussion will be and the nature of the discussion and how it will be moderated or how it will be done? Because I'm sure a lot of our folks that are listening, and of course we are definitely heard nationally, but we do have a decent amount of listeners here in this area as well. So I'm sure that they would love to learn more about the more fine details of the program, including the one that I just mentioned. So I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on that as well.
Absolutely. I feel like incarceration and homelessness can often go hand in hand. Like, as I said, the residents who come to our house for the most part would otherwise be homeless, and we only have 18 beds. So, of course, there are other people who, we get calls from caseworkers who are just hoping to get that referral, and we have to direct them back to DPS, unfortunately. But incarceration can easily lead to homelessness, and then that in turn leads to recidivism. We have what we do want to talk about in our Transition Journey event is the barriers that people who have been incarcerated experience. One is that we all know about, you have to check on your job applications if you have committed a felony. So that's a huge barrier because that's limiting their income. Second, for housing, they're going to ask for a background check as well. So that's a barrier. If your background check passes, how's your credit score? So many of these guys either don't have a credit score or their credit score is awful. So there are so many barriers that are literally limiting them from having the most basic necessities and like housing and clothes and transportation and things like that. But then also we have barriers limiting their ability to get a job, to create an income for them to even get those things. When you have all of these barriers stacked up against you, it's no wonder why so many people who are homeless came from prison.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Dean, I think we've got somebody else that's at the door because I just happen to be looking at the screen as well. So I think we need to bring them into the conversation as well. But I do see the not the 111 number that keeps popping in, but I see that we've got a 919-824 number as well. So that may even be Reverend Gatewood who I asked to call in as well. So I'm hoping that's who that is and everything, or maybe one of her folks. But they disappeared as well. So they're just calling in. Right, it disappeared.
Right. Oh. Well, let's see who this other person is because they've jumped in and out like double dutch probably about 4 times. So we're going to find out. Thanks for calling Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. You are now on the line. Please tell us who you are and where you're calling from.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we hear you.
Yes, I'm Dr. Bruno Signaco. I was invited by Mark Lee.
Yes, how are you doing? Tell us a little bit more about what you've got going on and everything. We've been trying to get you on for a while, but definitely I know that we've had a lot of different... Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm calling from UK, London, UK. I'm an author of a book titled The Art of Compassionate Business. I proposed the idea to Mark to talk about my new book that was published recently. It's a very interesting book about how companies can be both profitable and compassionate, and I think that it's a very interesting topic to discuss in your show.
Yeah, definitely glad that you were able to call in and everything, and hopefully you'll be able to stick around. I know you've been trying to bounce in and out and everything, and we've still got a few minutes, so I definitely want to get you on and everything, so I appreciate you and everything. And actually, I think that the 2 calls can be quite related to everything because one of the things that your book is about is being compassionate, and I think that that's something that we need to have on a regular basis with our inmates, is having more compassion and all of that. So definitely I think that whether it's inmates or whether it's a number of other folks, that we need to have a more compassionate society. So could you talk about the importance of compassion and also any experiences that you may have had in dealing with compassion as well as dealing with it, particularly with folks that might have been coming out of hard and rough situations, whether that's homelessness, whether that's the whole prison system or a number of other kinds of ways, because I think that in a lot of ways we're just not compassionate as we should be as a society. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you for the question. This is a very interesting question. I have seen many examples of compassion. For example, especially during the pandemic, I saw a lot of organizations that were becoming much more, some of my clients that were becoming much more compassionate with their employees. For example, employees that have some challenges with child care or some employees that have to care for their children at home. This company provided them with flexible work hours. I observed also that they allow them to work in a remote way, for example, with a flexible time. And also, I saw some companies that were also implementing some system, for example, Zoom or video conferences, that they were taking into account the difficulty that the employees were facing in these challenging times. I saw also some example of my client here in the UK that were compassionate, that they were providing with employees with a salary, even they were not going to work because they were closed down and everyone was in lockdown. So, and the companies, because they appreciated the employees, they were to keep their sustenance, their way of living, and they continue paying their salaries even when the companies were not getting any revenues. And I feel that we have to get more compassionate because we have to understand that we have a shared humanity. We all face challenges, we all have fears, we all have dreams, we all have expectations, And this applies to individuals and this applies to companies too. There are many examples of companies that were both profitable but also compassionate. This means they are much kinder, much more loving with different stakeholders, with different employees, customers, community members. And we see examples of companies that are providing with some social support to communities. For example, many companies here in London, they have a foundation when they're training youngsters. They have some youngster in need, or so, for example, some companies that are providing with free training to people that are starting with their work search, they don't have any skills. So, and I feel that compassion is related to the concept of love. I mentioned this in my book. Love is not only the love that you feel for your family, your friends, or your partner, but also love is a much more humanistic concept of love, which implies empathy, support, generosity, care, gratitude. I feel that during these pandemic times, we need to be much more supportive to one another. We cannot survive, we cannot thrive without each other. We are all interdependent, and there is a lot of research on this that observe that when companies and individuals rely on one another, there is a synergy. There is like a multiplying effect, which implies that you get more cooperative and the results tend to be much better than if you do things individually. So I want to highlight for the listeners that a good way to start with a compassionate day is to be more generous. You can, for example, be more generous. Not only implies using, for example, some like economic gifts that you give to someone, but also a word of support to different people that could be in need or they could be challenged during this time. But also being generous implies also being grateful. This means appreciating the contribution of others. For example, if you go to a shop and you're well served, saying thank you implies a lot to the other person, means a lot. So generosity, thankfulness or gratitude, and also being of help and adopting a kind attitude toward others is always a good point to start and also a good habit to take.
That makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate you sharing that, and definitely want folks to learn more about the title of the book, but definitely compassion is something very important. I think we've got another caller as well that I'm going to be bringing in. But Nora, how important do you think it is in your work to be compassionate? Because I'm thinking that you have to have that element of compassion big time when you're working with these folks that are coming out of the whole transition, out of the whole inmate situation and going into mainstream society. So I'm thinking that in your work, it's very important to be compassionate, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And then Gene can tell me who my other guest is as well, because that may be Reverend Gatewood, who I was expecting, or maybe somebody else. But definitely I'd love to hear your thoughts about the importance of compassion, Ms. Decker.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't really be in this work without compassion, because compassion has to be a level of understanding for what somebody's gone through as well, you know. So if you're not having compassion in this situation, I can't imagine that you'd be very helpful in this field of work, to be honest, but it's like compassion is different than sympathy. You don't want to get those boundaries crossed. You want to have compassion, but you don't want to be getting too close to the situation and let it affect your emotional abilities, because if that happens, then you won't be able to help them as well. You have to remain objective and focused, whereas your client may be, because they're still dealing with whatever they're dealing with. So we have to be the impartial person to take in what they're dealing with, hear it, understand it, have compassion, but then what are we going to do to support this person through that? And I did just want to quickly finish the last question you asked me, which was just talking a little bit about our fundraiser. So the tickets are $25 to hear a book reading by a local author, Tyrone Baker, who wrote A Convict's Perspective, followed by a panel of experts to talk about the journey that every person incarcerated has gone through. As this goes through, I will be the monitor of this event, and so I'll have pre-written questions to ask if the audience does not come up with questions that they would like to ask. But it would be a Zoom, and so people in the chat box can ask questions that they would like to be placed to the panelists throughout the book reading or throughout the panel, and then I, as the moderator, will be bringing up those questions. So, again, this is a fundraiser, and it is $25 a ticket, and the event is on our Facebook page, Straight Talk Support Group Durham. There's also a link on our website, Straight Talk Support Group, and, of course, all other donations in kind, whether it's clothing or toiletries or monetary, are always welcome. And thank you very much.
And I'm imagining these gifts can come from all over the world. So, like, if our buddy from England wants to send you gifts, or if our folks that are watching, because I do know that one of our platforms that we are on is actually in India. So, if we get gifts from around the world, y'all will not be turning those down as well. So I'm sure that y'all will accept gifts from throughout the globe, but y'all are looking for them here in the Triangle. Y'all will probably accept them from throughout the United States and throughout the world if they want to send them to the Straight Talk Transitional Home. Am I correct in saying that, Ms. Dicker?
Oh, absolutely. Any help that is offered from, it doesn't matter where you came from. You could be living under a rock, but if you're sending something for the house, we would absolutely accept that with open arms. All help is appreciated, and like we talked about earlier, we do really need that support of our community to be able to continue to lift up this population throughout their transition. So really any support is accepted. Like I said, it doesn't have to be monetary, but if you have some old clothes, old books, like an old iPod, like whatever, if there are things that you are no longer using anymore, or if you just have a couple extra bucks and you want to get some toothbrushes, I mean, we would accept all of it, because all these guys need those things, those basic necessities that we may have and not find need for anymore. They would find need for them, absolutely.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. Dean, I think we had one other caller, and I'm going to get back to my English caller as well, and I think we still got about another half an hour to go and everything. But was the 919-939 number, because I saw that you decked off and talked to them really quickly, was that Reverend Gatewood, or was it somebody else?
They didn't respond, so let's find out who it is right now.
All right.
Hey, how you doing? This is Reverend Curtis Gatewood. How you doing?
There we go. All right.
Good. That's Reverend Gatewood. I'm glad that we've got Reverend Gatewood in the house as well, and I guess I'll bring the English guy back in also. But Reverend Gatewood, we were talking earlier about the with Miss Nora Dicker, who's with a lady that you know all that well. She's with Bessie Elmore and the whole Straight Talk transition. I know that you've been doing a lot of work revolving around justice and all of that. And earlier we were talking to the gentleman from London about compassion, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about the importance of justice and all of that, because they're doing a lot of work trying to help a lot of these great folks that are coming out after having been in the prison system. And I know that you are a fan of Bessie's as well as some of the other work that they've done. And, of course, you've got your own justice work going on with McDougal Terrace and the big event that y'all have got coming up on Wednesday. So I'd love for you to share with this audience a little bit about that event, but also your thoughts just about the way that we treat our folks in the justice system, and particularly in the prison system, because I know you've done a lot of work in that field, and I also know that you are a fan of Miss Elmore. So just share a little bit of your thoughts and also a little bit about your event as well.
Yes, thank you so much, and it's always an honor to be on the call with you, your host. I'm not 100% sure who the host is with you today, but I do appreciate your always involving me where you can. Elmore and all of the other great people who are doing work. It is an honor to be in the same circle with you. Of course, my passion really goes to those who unfortunately end up in the criminal injustice system, the judicial system that has been much a part of the oppression that my people, African descendants, so on and so forth, had to contend with. And so I'm always sad when I see so many wrongful convictions. I was very upset and sad that there was not more attention given at the national level when Donald Trump, this racist nationalists, white nationalists, who somehow became president of the United States of America, when he took it upon himself, along with William Barr, to reactivate the federal death penalty. Very little was said and done at the national level. This happened in 2019. There had been no president to activate the federal death penalty since 2003. And to live in a system that is so embedded with racism and prejudice and prosecutorial misconduct, to have Donald Trump, a person who went out and used his own money to pay for full-page ads to call for the death sentence against 5 innocent black youth, of course, who became known as the Central Park Five, to have this person to reactivate the death penalty at the federal level, it should have been a slap in the face to all of us. And so that's one of the things that I found to be interesting. I know he, during President Trump's tenure, and by reactivating the death penalty in the little time he did, he still ended up killing more people by the federal death penalty than had done so over the past 3 decades. And he's the only president probably since the 1800s who used the death penalty on his way out after being defeated, as he tried to, of course, gain re-election, which he lied and claimed he won, which is ridiculous. But in any event, during the period of his defeat and before he left, he was still executing. And it was very little said about it. It was somewhat under the radar. And that's why it's good to have these types of talk shows like you have here, where those of us who may not have that national voice at this point, where we can come on and express what we are witnessing that you might not hear on CNN, that you might not hear on MSNBC, that you might not hear on ABC, CBS, BBC. But we can come on a show like this and talk about and tell people what's going on behind the scenes. Donald Trump, he played crazy, but he's not as crazy as he played. And he played a lot of people during this time. And about 126 people who are pretending to be elected officials on Capitol Hill should resign immediately because they partook in this terrorist attack, and they supported Trump even after this terrorist attack, voting against his impeachment. They all should be impeached, because to see this type of behavior going on by so-called elected officials, then who do you have in prison? Who do you have in prison if the so-called elected officials can commit a terrorist attack against the United States of America? Then who do you have locked up if they can get away with that? So, and then we know people were killed, at least 5 people killed, and they were going in to assassinate leaders. They were trying to assassinate the vice president of the United States, who've been pretty much tap dancing to their music. So who do we have incarcerated? If Donald Trump can break every law in the book, commit, and he said it himself. He said, I will be able to shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and will not lose support. He went beyond that. He helped to commit genocide against over 300,000 people before he left by playing crazy with this so-called pandemic. Well, the pandemic is real, but the way it was handled, of course, was basically an act of genocide. So there's just so much about the judicial system that breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because we have so many people who are arrested that should not be arrested, and so many people who should be arrested that are not arrested. Malcolm X put it like this. He said, the media helps to carry out this type of thing because the media is so powerful. They can make the villain look like the victim and the victim look like the villain. So anytime you have a powerful system that can miseducate and give misinformation about a certain group of people, such as African descendants, and make them look like the criminal all the time, then the judicial system in and of itself is basically just one of the tools of institutional white supremacy that would, in fact, incarcerate people in a new form of slavery. I know it's been described by one of our great book writers as the new Jim Crow. I see it as the new plantation.
Yep, I can definitely see that and everything. To my gentleman over there in London and everything, I just wondered your thoughts as one that's from overseas as to both what you saw in America in terms of race relations, but also in terms of like the judicial system, but also how that may play in the whole concept of compassion, which I know is what your book is all about and everything of that nature. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how that played, because I don't think that we saw that much compassion in the social media outlets, which definitely Donald Trump was using on a regular basis, and a lot of other folks were using. So I don't know that they always were definitely using compassion in the way that it should be used. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you saw in the past administration and what you're hoping to see from the current administration in terms of the use of compassion and also just in terms of justice.
Okay, very interesting question. Yes, what I saw from the previous administration, I don't want to take any political position because obviously I'm outside your country and I want you to, obviously you are much more knowledgeable of what is going on in your country, but from outside your country what I see that is the new administration as compared with the previous one tend to have a much more integrative approach, a much more inclusive approach. I see that also the new team that is in the government, the new administration, has a much more noticeable approach on social issues with much more inclusion. And I feel that a very important country like the United States need more inclusion. I feel that they have a very important potential, human resources, very qualified people that have been contributing to all type of industrial sectors, people that are very hardworking, and people that are coming from different origins, from the start of the country with the migrants. I would say that all these divisions, division based on race or religion, that are in some cases coming up, what I see in the media, I feel that they should be part of the past, because what we have to understand that on an individual level, and on a level of a country, the only way that the country can succeed is with all the citizens working together, hand in hand, all connected to one another and in a cooperative way. What I see in the media here in Europe is that there is a lot of division and a lot of contest and a lot of arguments. People in some cases arguing for important things, different positions, but in practice we have to go to a higher ideal, a higher goal that implies, I feel that all the United States citizens and all the people living in this wonderful country want the best for this country. They have all dreams for a better country, a country with a much greater potential, and I feel that in some cases we can put aside all these different opinions on topics that can be a bit contentious, but understand that we are all human beings. On the basic level, we are all human beings, and as I mentioned before in my previous comment, we all have dreams, we have fears, we have expectations, we have goals, we have setbacks, and this pandemic probably, even if we can find something positive in this pandemic time, they make us much more humane, connected to one another. Even when we have social distancing, we cannot have emotional distancing. We are still connected to one another, not only to close relatives and friends, but also to other people that need our help. And I feel that some institutions in the United States, some political parties, also some institutions like the church and other important institutions can contribute, including charities, foundations, charitable organizations that you have quite many in the United States, could be of importance to foster this compassion. Compassion is not something difficult to understand. It's an innate quality of any human being. This means that understanding how others feel, understanding how others think, and offering our help when possible. Why is so important? Because when we offer them our help, we are connecting to them, and also this creates bonds of reciprocity. They tend to respond in a similar way. Instead, what I see that in challenging time in the United States, people act in an opposite way. They start to agree, they try to get a violent or attack, and they create more violence. Violence always begets more violence. Compassion always begets more compassion. So I hope that the best goals to be achieved for this wonderful country, and I hope that this administration take on board not only the richness of the different backgrounds that are in this generous country, but also integrating, because every cultural background can contribute to the country with the richness of their heritage. Every different group that you have in that country can integrate with one another in a way that they can make the country even bigger. And I feel that we should leave all these divisions that are part of the past and create a country for human beings. This means, besides going beyond race, going beyond religion, let's go to the basic level, that is, we are all human beings. We have a shared humanity. We are all together in this trip, and the only way to understand that we cannot succeed on our own. I like to paraphrase the famous thinker of observe, no man is an island. Well, I have to understand this on the level of a country. The country cannot succeed without its people. So in the case of the United States or any other country in the world, but we are here talking about the United States, the only way for this country to succeed doesn't rely on politicians, doesn't rely on institutions, rely on any single individual that is contributing to different extent on a daily basis, being much more generous, being more grateful, being kinder, being more understanding, being more patient also. If we have people with different opinions or different views, being more understanding and try to see the common ground that we have, that is humanity, our common humanity, our common humanness.
That makes a lot of sense. Reverend Gatewood, I do get to everybody, and we've only got about another 15 minutes or so to go and everything, but I do know you've got this event coming up, and definitely one of the things that I think we all need to be more compassionate about is the fact of basic human rights. And one of the things that you're doing is this event on Wednesday, and of course we all want to live in definitely a place that has provides the right amount of food and nutrition, has the good place to live, meaning a habitat and things of that nature. And they're just basic things that everybody wants in their existence and all of that. And it seems to me that that's part of what you're fighting for on this event, because you're finding that there is an environmental justice thing that is going on here in Durham, North Carolina, where there are some residents of our city that are not getting some of these basic rights, and they are definitely having some things that they should be having, but they are facing like living in apartments with asbestos and the kind of other things that are going on that are definitely detrimental to their own health and all of that. And we had actually talked about that earlier on the other streaming podcast, but I'd love for you to share with Dean a little bit about that so that you can talk a little bit. And Dean, by the way, is my partner in crime on this audio podcast. You were asking the main other person and everything, but it's Dean Geronimo, the stage name and everything. But definitely, if you could share a little bit about what's going on here and the event that you've got coming up on Wednesday and everything, because that does sound like that even falls into what my English brother was talking about with compassion and all of that, because you're definitely trying to help these folks, and they are in, you call it, a state of an emergency.
Absolutely, and I thank you, and Brother D also thank you for this opportunity to say what is in my heart. And I think a lot of times we talk about healing, we talk about passion, we talk about reconciliation, but we often seldom omit the medication, which is justice. And people need justice. And what is going on in Durham, and I'm pretty sure it's probably going on throughout the nation, is many of our people who are amongst what the Bible will refer to as the least likely to live to be 50, or the least likely to receive business opportunities, the least likely to receive wealth based upon a tradition of racism and being left out based upon color, based upon your forefathers and ancestors. A lot of our people, did not have money to hand over to the next generation. So unfortunately, they are put into a position where we are depending on a government that has not been fair to us to take care of our most vulnerable. And if we're not in a position where we can oversee or to assist in making sure there is justice in that process, then the vulnerable will be mistreated as usual. It looks as if in Durham, North Carolina, through the Durham Housing Authority, of course, which is a part of the United States Housing of Urban Development, Durham Housing Authority is the managers of public housing here in Durham. And throughout that existence or that relationship, many of the needs of our people are falling through the cracks. Basic things such as just having a safe home. We're not even going to get into the heat being off in the winter and slow repairs. That's another major issue. But worst of all, people are being harmed by a silent killer. Of course, carbon monoxide, gas, probably leaks, different things in these homes that will be creating a severe hazard and what I refer to as a state of emergency, because all of these public housing areas are housing our most vulnerable citizens, whether you're talking about women, whether you're talking about children, whether you're talking about the elderly. These are the people who are depending on this system to take care and do the right thing. Unfortunately, a lot of people's eyes are not on the ball, and I call upon not only the Durham Housing Authority to get the house in order, but the ministries and the churches and all people who claim to be speaking for God and Jesus. Jesus came right out of the gate, saying that he came, to speak good news to the poor. And he talked about setting at liberty those who are oppressed. And so I do not understand how the church community can sit through what is happening when we've already been through this before. I think it was 2019, right before we had the COVID, or at least just before we were informed about it. I'm sure it was known long before we got the memo. But we had scheduled a march in the Durham Public Housing Center right before we got the news about COVID, and we pulled back because at that time Durham Public Housing had a major issue with another housing complex known as McDougal Terrace, the largest public housing complex in the city of Durham, over 300 residents. So the matter that was brought to my attention that led to the rally for Wednesday is going on in Hoover Road, altogether different housing complex, but it's still under the same banner of the Durham Housing Authority, DHA. So on Wednesday at 2 o'clock, we are inviting the community, those who would like to assist and stand with the people, those, whether you're an organization, whether you live in a public housing area, or whether you just see our communities as the village, which we hope to, again, rebuild. The village that takes care of its children. You don't have to be my biological sister, my biological brother, but you're a part of the village that cares for all of its children. That's what we were hoping this will all lead to. But on Wednesday at 2 p.m., this coming Wednesday, it'll be January 27, at 330 East Main Street, that's the address for Durham Housing Authority's, their headquarters, downtown Durham. We will be standing there demanding that they inspect all of their housing units throughout the city of Durham because we keep having these cases coming up little by little, one by one. One by one, someone has a problem with their gas stove. One by one, somebody's, when they have been tested or their home been tested, it's filled with carbon monoxide. One by one, two by two. And so what we think, it's time for the Durham Housing Authority to go and check all of its units, whether it's McDougal Terrace, whether it's Oxford Manor, whether it's Hoover Road, all of their units, and inspect to make sure that their homes are free of those pollutants such as asbestos and radon carbon monoxide, lead poisoning in water, all these different things that could kill people silently, kill our people silently. We need the Durham Housing Authority, not only that they do a check, but we probably should call for an independent investigation, independent check that should go on throughout these units to make sure people are safe. Because we keep hearing these things, and this is nothing to play with. This is a matter of life or death. And so, therefore, we are going to be holding a rally on this coming Wednesday at 2 o'clock again. If anyone needs to call me, my number is 919-939-6311. And again, I'm Reverend Curtis E. Gatewood. If you want to send me an email, my email address is Gatewood, Gatewood, loves, Loves, at Gmail. Loves Justice. Gatewood loves justice at gmail.com. And so feel free to give us a call about it if you want to talk about it and other things that we can do, because this is coming out of an organization that we started recently, in 2017, called Jesus Uniting Souls to Increase Community Engagement. That is the acronym for Justice Ministration. And Justice Ministration had also given birth to a campaign called the Stop Killing Us, SKU, School Solutions Campaign. And so this is another part of how we're being killed. We're not just being killed by police officers. We address that issue, but we're being killed by police officers. We're being killed by the environment. We're being killed by terrorists in shirts and neckties who pass terrorist legislation or violent legislation, such as taking people's health care, taking their health care and putting pollutants in their communities. There are so many ways that we are being killed. So we're saying stop killing us in all the various ways, and all of the legislation that would cause the killing to take place. We're not just being killed by gunpoint, we're also being killed by pinpoint, by people who are signing violent legislation. And so we are calling on the community to wake up, rise up, and stand with us.
I appreciate you, Reverend Gatewood, and definitely I know a lot of folks will be listening and will definitely be joining you and everything. We've got about just about less than 5 minutes to go, and one of the things I want to do just to wrap everything up, and I'll start with you, Miss Dicker, and everything, is one of the things I love to do on all my shows and everything is give folks a chance to share how they can be gotten in touch with, and also ways about the event that you're part of. And then the last thing that I like folks to do is be able to share like a final thought of positivity or encouragement that they would like to give to folks, particularly those that are involved in the justice fight and all of that. So I'll start with you, Ms. Dicker, and work my way down to my brother from England, and then come to Reverend Gatewood, and then by that time we'll be all wrapped up, and me and Dean can talk about what other shows we've got coming up in the near future. But Ms. Dicker, it's on you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me here, virtually tonight. I really appreciate it. If anyone wants to get into contact with me personally, my number is 919-360-7793. And again, the fundraiser that I am here talking about is called The Transition Journey, which we are going to have a book reading from author Tyrone Baker about a convict's perspective, followed by a panel of experts to talk about the journey that everyone experiences who has been released from incarceration. You can also contact me through our Facebook group, Straight Talk Support Group Durham. I am the one who mans our social medias, and so you can contact me through there, as well as the contact box on our website. The tickets for this event are $25. It is a fundraiser, and so our purpose is to raise some funds, and those tickets can be purchased on Facebook. Again, thank you so much for having me here, and I guess my note of positivity is just, here we are, 3 different people on this show, well, 5, of course, different people on this show talking about criminal justice and compassion in so many different ways. So it just really gives me hope that, we have people working on the criminal justice, on the justice side of it too, and it really gives me hope to see and hear everybody talk about it together. So thank you so much for having me tonight.
Sounds great. To my gentleman from London and everything, I'd love to hear you, for folks, how they can learn more about your book, about compassion, and also a little bit about your final thoughts as well that you would like to share with the audience on that front. So, and then I'll go to Reverend Gatewood from you. But definitely, I'd love to hear your final thoughts about compassion and justice, and also ways that folks can reach you and learn more about the book that you've got.
Okay, I'm Dr. Bruno Signaco. You can find my book anywhere online, on any bookshop online or offline. The title of the book is The Art of Compassionate Business. It's a best-selling book, and also they can find me on, for example, my website, www.humanorientedenterprise.com, www.humanorientedenterprise.com. As a last thought, I want to comment about two questions for self-reflection that everyone can ask themselves when you start the day. How can I be more loving with others? And how can I be more compassionate and generous with others? Asking ourselves this question on a continuous basis, on a daily basis, according to research, there is a very positive change that starts with us. So when we reflect on this question on a continuous basis, we will understand that we share a common humanness, common humanity. We're all humans and we have the same traits. Even the facade look different. Even our thoughts and views, political views or religious views might be different. We are here with the same purpose, to contribute to the world in the best way, to help each other, to support one another, to care for one another. We have bond of reciprocity. We're brothers, and we are trying to support one another, brothers, from the wider perspective of brotherhood. So my only thought that I want to mention for this talk, and thank you for the invite, is try to be a bit more generous, because the change starts with you. Other institutions can help you change the world, but the relevant change is always starting with you. Try to see if you can be more supportive, not only to close people, but also to people that you don't know, strangers. Try to help people that are in need. Try to be much more understanding and empathetic with the needs of others. Try to be more generous, not only in an economic way, but also with your words, kind words to each other. It creates better bonds, but also generous with the advice, good advice given to people, and also supporting them when possible. Thank you very much.
No problem. Glad to have you on the call as well. Reverend Gatewood, it's on you. If you can give me like a succinct answer, and I know that that's sometimes hard for you and everything, but we can get a succinct answer as words of encouragement. And also, you already told people about the event, but any words of encouragement that you would like to share and everything, and particularly in the field of justice and just in words of positivity and encouragement as well.
Amen. Thank you. First of all, Brother Lee, I'm hoping that you know that you can feel free to share my information with your distinguished guests, because they sound like interesting people that I would like to know more about and to work with on this mission. I would like to, for my closing words, to come from Jesus's what he referred to as the greatest law, because Jesus was asked, "What is your greatest law?" And I think a lot of times that law gets lost in so much Bible study, preaching, and Sunday school, and singing, and shouting, and preaching. Sometimes I think we forget, apart from the faith community, what Jesus said will be the greatest law. And he gave two things. He said, first of all, love God with all your heart, your mind, and your soul. And then he said, equal to this, love thy neighbor as thyself. And so a lot of times we lose the love part of life. We lose the love part of the movement. We lose the love part even in our relationships and in our homes. Sometimes it becomes so tense. We're trying to do certain things, but we often forget about the main thing that would bring us together and would sustain us, and that is the fact that we are an interwoven part of humanity, and we all rely on each other's well-being, whether we realize it or not. And when one part of the family is not well, none of us are well. When one part of the family is not free, none of us are free. That's why people would often ask, do you see the chickens coming home to roost? In other words, the people who've been acting up, being mean to us, now when things start happening to them, some of the same things that happen to them, they act as if they're surprised because they allowed all these bad things to exist. They were thinking that the bad things were just going to come after the people that they wanted, but the bad things would get out of hand, and the bad things would come right back to you. So we're saying, I'm saying this to the church community as well as people who may not have any faith or care about faith. but all people can unite around caring for the other person and putting yourself in that person's place and loving that person as you love yourself. And that is what justice looks like in the public square.
I'm so glad you said that, Reverend Gatewood, because that's actually something that I've brought up on a couple of my shows and everything, because it is my opinion that most of our different faiths, whether it's folks that practice Islam, folks that practice Christianity, folks that practice Buddhism or Hinduism or a number of other religions, even the Yoruba religions and the religions of the Native American kind of religious philosophies and things of that nature, that at the end of the day, they all pretty much have the same common goal, which is basically having certain common principles, whether that's respecting your parents, respecting your neighbor, and a lot of those other things. But I oftentimes feel that too often our religious leaders get caught up in the division points, and I'm of the opinion that there's many ways to get to the heaven's gates and all of that, and that there's not just one highway that leads up to there. But then I know that a lot of times folks don't always agree with me because they feel that there's only one way to get there or one way to get to whatever place within the Justice March. But one of the things I've always admired about you and some of your other compatriots is that y'all are about bringing a wide umbrella of people into the justice movement. So I consider you to be a great friend of the justice movement and all of that. So once again, glad to have you here on Straight Talk. Hope to get you back on in the very near future. I know that you and your family members are doing your own podcast here on Blog Talk, but definitely I will be reaching out to you both on this platform and the streaming platform. But definitely glad to have you join our conversation. Dean, I think we hit another one out the park. I don't know what you think, but we've got all kinds of other great guests that we're going to be coming on and everything. I know I'm talking to some other artists, some other entrepreneurs, some other activists, and of course, we're just going to keep this thing rolling along and everything. But I think that we had another great conversation that dealt with everything from something that you are a big fan of, which is, of course, what we're doing in our justice system, being a part of that justice system, on down to talking about compassion. So I think we covered a lot of stuff and got some great information, and hopefully folks will go back and catch it on our network. You hear me talking about the International Broadcast Media, which is the streaming platform network that I'm part of, but we also have Next Level, which is our audio network, and we're doing some things on that network, and we've got some amazing programs that you can tell our listeners about, and of course they can hear it on the various platforms that we're on. So definitely they can go back and catch the replays, because we just got all kinds of conversations going on, and we just keep this whole movement moving and get some interesting dialogue. And it's not just us. It's folks like Russ. It's folks like Mona. It's folks like a number of others that are bringing their dialogue as well. So I think we put together a little bit of a monster of a media package here as well. That's part of what I'm part of with the IBM and the International Broadcast Media, but also what you have helped me create here on the audio side. So I think that folks over there, like Reverend Gatewood said, BBC, CBS, watch out. We got our own kind of like things, but we're bringing you all kinds of powerful news. And if there are newsmakers out there that want to be heard, either in Durham or in New York or even in England or any part of the globe, we always love hearing from the newsmakers, but also hearing what they've got to say about the issues that they're dealing with, as well as them bringing us their stories, because we do love hearing the positive stories, but also the challenges that people face as well. So that's my little spiel. What you got to say, Dean?
You know what? We had an outstanding show tonight, so thank all of our guests for being with us, you know, and it's Straight Talk with Dean and Mark, y'all. Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to catch our replays on the Skyhawk Radio Network tomorrow afternoon and Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you missed those, then you can catch us again and again and again on Radio Public, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, Stitcher, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, Castbox, Podfollow, Deezer, JSavin, and right here on Blog Talk Radio, where we are part of the Level Podcast Network, where you can catch other shows such as The Black Girl's Guide to Surviving Menopause, Chef Gang Radio Show, Funk from the Front Seat, Funk Music with Zach, Learning Unwrapped, Let's K-12 Better, The Mark Lee Show. Marketing with Rush, hashtag Rush Selfie. Mona Shakes and the Minority Report. Mullings, Music, and Memories with Mark Lee. The Online Dinner Party with Mark Lee. The Plant a Good Seed Podcast. The Reinvention Road Trip. She's on Call. The Just Podcast. The Spin It Social Hour. Virginia Interfaith Live. And WNC Original Music. Now, like I always say, when you walk outside your front door, it's showtime and the world is your stage. Just make sure that people are not watching the rehearsal. With that being said, as a six-man Dean Geronimo signing off, y'all have an outstanding week. We see y'all in 7 days.
That's right. We'll see you with another great show with more great guests. And until that time, y'all have a great one. I'm out of here as well.